Hi, my name is Mark Ryan. I'm going to walk you through testing Zero Trust with Zscaler Private Access Transformation Edition. So I have an environment set up. I've got some devices down here in the bottom, managed with Zscaler Client Connector, unmanaged device without Zscaler Client Connector, and then a managed device without Zscaler Client Connector. They're managed because they're enrolled in Intune through Azure AD, and by virtue of that they have a device certificate and user certificates installed on them, which means that as we authenticate to the Zero Trust Exchange and we do SAML authentication, the IDP is able to return to us, is the device managed or not. Obviously the unmanaged device will fail, or we'll do username and password authentication and we'll consume the data in that. Based on those things, we're able to make some decisions when we access a web page. Do we allow direct access to the web page? Do we do browser-based access to the web page, or do we isolate the access to that web page? Regardless of the access method, we're going to do inspection of that traffic. So we're going to block a WASP top 10, we can do custom controls, and we're going to demonstrate that as part of the testing as well. In our AWS environment, we've got a Bastion host, we've got cloud connectors and app connectors. App connectors providing inbound access, cloud connectors providing outbound access for ZIA and ZPA. So they're giving us the connectivity from the AWS environment back to my data center environment. So we'll demonstrate that. And then we've got some privileged remote access. So how do we give, let's say, the unmanaged device access to devices or to services within the environment? So this could be a third-party access needing to, this could be a third-party device connecting through the Zero Trust Exchange to SSH onto the CentOS server to manage the web pages, or they might be doing RDP to the domain controller, or they might be doing support to this managed client and needing to look at software on the endpoint. So we'll demonstrate that as part of the Transformation Edition functionality. So let's jump out of the presentation and jump into the demonstration. So all of my workstations are remote desktop from my Mac. So we've got the managed device with Zscaler Client, managed device without the client, and the unmanaged device here. So we'll start with the managed device. We'll open up the browser. We'll go to the Apache web server. Apache web server just displays. It's going through Zscaler Client Connector. I'm already authenticated into the client. We'll just show the client down here is running. It's telling me my client host name. It's telling me my tunnels are connected to Zscaler Client Connector, Zscaler Private Access, and the internet security. If we come across now to the device without Zscaler Client Connector and open up Edge, let's go to the Apache web server this time. This point, it's redirecting me before I can get in there, and the reason it's redirecting me is I'm not running the client, so it needs to identify who I am for what policy to apply for browser-based access. So I'm going to do certificate authentication. We'll select a certificate in this case. And now I'm able to access the service. I've got browser-based access to my web server. If we then come across to the unmanaged device and open up Edge, we'll go to the Apache web server. It's going to redirect me. And at this point, I don't have a client certificate. I'm an unmanaged device. So I will just log in with my credentials. We consume those credentials and we launch into an isolated browser session. Interesting for that. And so I'm able to access the session. This is all pixel rendered down to the client machine. So we've got three different access methods, three different ways to control that access. And what we're then going to do is inspect the content. So I've got a couple of different vulnerabilities that we're going to inspect for. One is a SQL injection attack. We're trying to inject a certain parameter through a JavaScript function. So if we come over to, let's start with my managed device again, and we run that attack. we're getting the forbidden. That is the Zscaler inspection policy, intercepting that traffic, scanning against our threat engine, and blocking that access to that, that transaction. We could do a PHP injection, similar kind of request, but slightly different format. If we come across to the managed device without Zscaler Client Connector, where this is happening in the browser isolation, we can run that, and the browser isolation, the browser-based access is still scanning that content and blocking those transactions. And then finally, I've got a remote code execution. We'll run that on the unmanaged device. I could either append it to this URL, or I can paste it in, and then my session will continue as I'm redirected back into the application. And so I get the forbidden access at that point. So SSL inspection, HTTP content inspection across the different access methods as part of Zscaler private access. So let's think about a couple of other things. So if I come across to my managed device, my managed device gives me any number of different ways to access things. I'm going to SSH onto my my Bastion host that's running in AWS, and I've got a couple of different things that I can do here. I've got some different pieces of HTML, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it across to my CentOS server. Now the CentOS server is actually running in my data center, so the cloud connector is providing that connectivity from AWS back to my data center, if we refer back to the diagram. But I still got that connectivity. I can update the file on my web server, and if I then go back to my isolation, and let's go to HTTPS, the Apache web server, we can see that it's interestingly cached the content by the looks of it. Oh, I copied across the original file back. Let's So let's SSH onto the Bastion host, and from here what I'm going to do is I'm going to update the index HTML file on my web server. So I've got the original file, but I've also got the updated file. So we're going to copy the update across through Cloud Connector from the Bastion hosted AWS across Zscaler Private Access to the CentOS server in the data center. Obviously this is very just representative of how you can provide connectivity. The web page has been updated. If we now come across, let's say, to the unmanaged device and refresh this web page now, we can see that the content has been updated. So let's get a cloud connector using ZPA to connect clouds to clouds and clouds to data centers. This could be a web server running in the AWS environment, making a database connection, for example, back to a database running in my data center. So I've got a number of different connectivity mechanisms to access those files. So let's think about a couple of other things that we might want to do. This unmanaged device could be doing things like the third party needing to access my machine or whatever to be able to SSH onto that CentOS server. So we're going to go to privaccess.welshgeek.net. So this is our private access, if I spelled access right. PrivAccess is the privileged remote access environment for Zscaler Private Access. So I've got some consoles delivered here that enable me to get to different services. So I could SSH onto that CentOS server directly. So this is a browser rendered SSH session. So I can log in here. I'm going to be really bad and I'm going to log in as root. I'll typed the password wrong, or I thought I had. Let's try that again. There we go. So let's go to back into the website directory. And I've still got my original file here, so what we're going to do is we'll just copy the index original file back over to be index.html, and we'll put it back to how it was, and that file is then instantly available and updated as you'd expect. So the privileged remote access gives me SSH access. I could also for example, RDP onto my certificate server. Let's log in here. And I've got a remote access session onto my certificate server that enables me to make some changes to the certificate policy, my certificate authentication. There we go. I've connected to the wrong one. And we'll retarget this, and I've got full remote access control onto that that certificate server in my Windows environment. Let's also consider another use case that this needs to make a remote desktop connection and help us support this managed client. So the managed client at this point is running Zscaler Client Connector. Zscaler Client Connector registers the device name, desktop 08si025.welshgeek.net. So we could come into our privileged remote access and we can connect over PRA into that machine to be able to support access that machine. So this is just figuring out where the device is, making a connection inbound to that client with a bit of luck. There we go. We connect onto that device. What we'd expect to see is my my session was disconnected there into that client because you only have one machine connected on there, and now I'm connected onto that remote client through privileged remote access. So I can do a number of different things to support users remotely and give third-party access control to support devices as well. So let's jump onto the Zscaler Private Access Administration interface. So I'm going to come onto ZPA admin SSO. We'll sign in, demonstrating single sign-on remote role-based access control into the environment. We can see all of those different accesses in the logs. We have full analytics of the logs and diagnostic information that is being streamed into my SIM, and I can see all of those transactions. Here is my remote client-to-client access. I can look in at the web inspection traffic, and I can see all of those inspection rules. Let's take a look at the policy violations, and we could see that remote code execution and injection, and we can see the transaction logs, and we can get all the way into the data about which transactions, who was doing what and what reason codes, what the URL was. We can see that we were trying to do that remote code execution on the device. So we get full analytics that could be used by a SOC team to understand who is attacking us and what they're trying to do in those attacks. From the application segmentation, we have all our app segments. We can use API to programmatically update and control these application segments. We can see which ones are web-based access, we can see which ones are privileged remote access, and which ones are RDP sessions. We see all of the inspection controls, the rules that we're writing. So these are the OWASP top 10. We can write our own custom controls, things like directory traversal if I wanted to write my own inspection controls and things like that. And of course, we've also got our privileged portals. So I have my privileged remote access, my privaccess.welshgeek.net that says who can access which applications. So with that, I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to come back to hopefully the diagram showing the private access. We see our 3 different clients connecting through the Trust Exchange. We've shown AWS to DataCenter connectivity. We've shown that happening through privileged remote access. We've shown client-to-client inbound, and we've shown the different mechanisms for RDP support. Obviously, any questions, let me know. Mark@zscaler.com.